Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Geopolitical Cousins. We are back at it. If you have children in the car, there's a little bit of a rant about Ebola virus about 30, 40 minutes in. You might hear some strong language being thrown from me and Marko around that. This was a great six-pack. We start with Iran. We recorded around noon Central, Tuesday, May 26th. This will probably come out tomorrow morning, so everything could change in between now and then, but I don't think that much is going to change. But so you situate where we were with the information that we had. Email me at jacob@jacobshapiro.com if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Thanks for all the feedback on the Trade Value Index, those 3 episodes that dropped. We actually weighed quite a bit whether to drop them all at one time. Would that damage the algorithm? Anything else like that? So curious to see how you listen to them and write to me about how you listen to them and if you like that sort of content. That's all the housekeeping I have. Take care of the people that you love. Cheers and see you out. All right, listeners, you just heard 4 hours from us on the Trade Value Index, but cousin, I haven't talked to you in over a week. And I was feeling the loss of your presence as I was driving today home from dropping something off. I was like, man, I haven't talked to Marko in a while. I miss cousin Marko. So it's nice to be back with you, man.
Oh man, same, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Like we like these are therapeutic for me. So same. It's been very busy. I was in Europe. Um so that's why it was very difficult to get on a call.
It is an unideal time zone for us, but nice to be back together. Also, listener, I mean, some of you will see this, but most listeners, Marko is escaping from LA. He's moving right now, so instead of his usual office, it's just a white wall. So I'm in my usual space, surrounded by 3-year-old art supplies. But cousin is in a fairly Spartan room, and we're going to bring you a 6-pack today. Cousin, I know you want to leave Iran to last, but we're recording Tuesday, May 26th. That's about noon Central here in New Orleans. And in the last couple of hours, Iran has accused the United States of violating the ceasefire agreement. There have been U.S. airstrikes on Iranian ships and apparently missile sites in southern Iran. So we can leave it to the end if you want, but I just want to say apparently they knew that we were getting on to talk because the guns are firing again.
Let's handle it right at the top. What happened was we had strikes on the ships, which I thought weren't good. There were no ships, which is confusing. There were not supposed to be any.
We already got rid of the entire Iranian Navy. Apparently, they're the Borg. They've regenerated in record time here.
I think what's interesting, yes, the United States supposedly attacked some ships. I think it was overnight for us. So it was some hours ago. There hasn't been retaliation by Iran, which I think is important to note. So the strikes were limited. Iran is dilly-dallying in its response, although it has vowed a swift and decisive response. So it may very well come. I think just the verbiage around the attacks, both the Iranian response and the American, act of attacking, suggests to me that the biggest sticking point in the current negotiation is how do I sell this domestically?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what's happening. There's clearly already an agreement to push off nuclear negotiations into the future and to just kind of like start on some level opening the strait. I mean, I sense from what's going on that is the case. Pakistan's visit to China was a big deal, a big trigger for me to kind of think about where Iran is. China is clearly no longer a passive actor. It is coordinating. There was an official statement over the weekend by the Chinese saying like, no, Hormuz really should get open. And then you have this coordination with Pakistan where it's effectively like calling in your negotiator so they can go back and land the plane on the deal. And then, of course, in the U.S., the situation is getting worse and worse in terms of gasoline prices, in terms of politics, in terms of all sorts of polling in key critical states that used to not be battleground states for the Republicans. So I think we're getting a deal. The problem, the holdup is the moment each side floats down the terms of some form of an agreement, even if it's an agreement to push off the actual nuclear negotiations, they start getting eviscerated in the sort of public square. And so on one hand, that's good because if what's holding back some form of a sanguine outcome is domestic politics, like that can be resolved. It's not, in other words, I think the nuclear program. It's not, in other words, Iran wanting to hold the global economy hostage forever. So that's good. The bad is, well, what kind of an agreement is going to be to satiate the domestic public square? Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, there's a bunch to unpack. I'll add in a couple of things. Rubio was asked about the strikes. He's in India right now. And he said it was going to take a few days to get through the issues that are currently there. I think if you're looking at the strikes, you can read them as sort of the last gasp of the fighting before a deal takes hold, or you can look at it as a failure of negotiations and the Trump administration, in particular Donald Trump, feeling like he has to assert himself again. I will say, especially Hamid Reza Azizi, who's been on my podcast, but other Iranian analysts that I've been talking to, Iran is very skeptical, understandably so, of the United States right now, and is preparing for all of these talks about leaks and Pakistan going to China and Trump and Beijing and everything else like that. They are planning, and they should plan for the worst, hope for the best. They're planning as if the United States is prepping for a major escalation in the next 3 to 4 weeks. That this is all a dog and pony show. That they want Iran to take a breath and think things are fine, and then they're going to come in and they're going to stop dropping bombs again. And every time Trump vacillates from "oh, we have a deal" to literally like 6 hours later tweeting a picture of a rocket that says, or a bomb that says, "thank you for your attention to this matter," flying over Iran, like the Iranians sort of feel confirmed in that, and you get those strikes. I think you're right also to point out that it seems like the particulars of whatever this deal is going to be have sort of been ironed out. If you're following Iranian press, according at least to Farce, for example, the last sticking point is the unfreezing of Iranian assets, some 20, 25 billion of Iranian assets. The nuclear material apparently is being pushed off to a second phase, or they're going to ship it to China, which is like wink, wink. I'm going to ship, my nuclear material here in New Orleans that I've been building in my house to China. Wink, wink. That's really going to work. I can't believe anybody's going to buy that. And I think you have your finger on the right thing here, which is for President Trump, objective reality doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the deal is good or not, or if it's different than the JCPOA, or if it's worse. But he does have to be able to sell it. And the terms that he's ironing out are so bad that he is struggling to sell it, even to some of his loyalists. I will confess, though, this is where I have some confusion, because I thought one of President Trump's greatest virtues was he doesn't listen to lying Ted Cruz and little Marko and all these guys who are criticizing him. He just does what he wants. If you're Representative Massey or John Cornyn or who was the other guy that he down here in Louisiana, Bill Cassidy. You go against Trump, fine. Yeah. He's going to primary you. He's going to get rid of you. He doesn't care what you think. He's got America first. He's got he's got the interests of America at heart. And now this narrative shift where it's like, but Ted Cruz is tweeting that these are not good terms, and the Israelis are upset that these aren't good terms. Trump's whole virtue is supposed to be that he doesn't care about that stuff. That he's going to make a deal because it's the best deal, not because he is somehow susceptible to that kind of political pressure. And to his credit, that's generally how he's governed. So why is it all of a sudden that now he's having trouble selling the terms of the deal? The lack of confidence makes him look weird to me too. And then just the last thing to throw in here, of course, the Israelis have popped off this morning. They've extended, they said they were stopping at the yellow line in Lebanon, a couple kilometers into Lebanon. They've renewed airstrikes in Lebanon, reports of ground operations and further incursions in Lebanese territory. I don't know if you saw that report yesterday where Netanyahu was lamenting the fact that he was having trouble convincing Trump about Israel's interests on Iran.
I did see that.
Well, no shit, BB.
That's the best indicator. This is, going towards a deal, right? Because obviously, look, I'll say a couple of things here. First of all, Iranians should prepare for war. Obviously, they would be irresponsible not to. But when we observe what's happened over the last 8 weeks or however long this ceasefire has actually kind of held, the US has not materially increased its military posture in the region. Like, that's my Occam's razor here. If US had an insidious plan to restart the war, then it should have brought in more destroyers, Ehrlichberg destroyers that would have increased significantly the ability of the US Navy to interdict missiles. US has 74 of these or 73. It has 10 in the region. It brought 2 extra destroyers over the last 8 weeks. They could have easily reloaded significantly, flown more heavy equipment. We would have known this my clients in the region would have told me, because sovereign wealth funds and pension funds have good intelligence. So that's the first thing. I think that's relevant. So U.S. can, on occasion, do what it did over the last 24 hours, which is attack some ships, probably some Zodiac boats. Some guys trying to dump a mine over the side of their fishing boat because the U.S.
And
does not.
and also some missile sites in southern Iran. It wasn't just
Yeah,
the ships. Like they hit, it wasn't like they're bombing Tehran or anything like that. But they did hit some, Iranian territory as well.
and look,
So
the
that's
U.S. has the tools to do that, right? But for a more significant restart of the war, the U.S. is not prepared for that. So either Pete Hegseth is even more incompetent than we all think.
he'd have to try pretty hard to be more
He would
incompetent than
have
I
to
think he is.
try immensely hard to be more incompetent. So I don't think that's it. I think it's just that the US is done with any significant re-upping. The other thing is that I think the attack over the last 24 hours serves a different purpose. It serves the purpose for President Trump to remind all his critics, which now includes many members of his own party, that US has complete free access of Iranian airspace, like complete. And so why is that important? It's important to basically tell all the critics, like, guys, chill. If we make a deal with Iran right now, the time is actually on America's side. It's not on Iran's side. This is now the problem for Iran. And there's way too many people like patting Iran on the back for winning this conflict. But let me just be very clear. In 18 months, nobody will be using Strait of Hormuz except poor Iraq, which is a vassal state of Iran, by the way.
18
Like,
months? That's pretty aggressive. I agree with you, like 2 or 3 years. 18 months would be, but I don't know. If the Saudis and the Emiratis decide they wanna get around it, I guess they can.
look, building a pipeline through the desert is easy. China is building the UAE additional pipeline to Fujairah. This was the same argument, Jacob, that you nailed and that I nailed. I know we were both on the same side when we made fun of the Economist cover that Europe would freeze itself. And then the Germans
Mhm.
built LNG import terminals in 3 months. I always tell my clients and all of you listening to this, if you go on Google right now or you use Claude and ChatGPT and say, how much does it take to build a pipeline? How long does it take to build a pipeline? And whatever the answer is, you got to divide it by 3 because it's the fucking war. You know what I mean? And it's all hands on deck. So if you curiously found yourself in the summer of 2022 Googling how long does it take to build an import terminal, and it came out and said, oh, 18 to 24 months, and then you were like, what if you were German and about to freeze? Then the answer was 3 fucking months because they're German and they're not going to freeze because it's an advanced economy. So similarly, the issue here is that by demonstrating that the US has free access to Iranian airspace, President Trump is kind of telling his critics, guys, pump the brakes on this like Iran won this conflict. In 12, 18 months, we get around the Strait of Hormuz, and if we got to bomb him again, I'll bomb him again. So why not make a deal right now? Because right now, because I made a mistake and my Secretary of Defense was not the ideal candidate. Other than that little note, right now I kind of need a deal. You know what I mean? Like, so that's where I think, like, I see like Cory Booker, who hasn't been relevant since like 2015.
He's still around? Yeah.
He's still around. Cory Booker is like, President Trump's deal with Iran is disastrous. And I'm like, okay, buddy, like you can say that going to the war is disastrous. But why? Like, what do you want President Trump to do as a Democratic senator from New Jersey? Are you telling me you want existential conflict with Iran?
Well, if you're a Democrat, you want this war to go on as long as possible at this point, because
Exactly.
every day that it goes on, the Trump
But that's what I
administration is
mean.
just giving itself more rope, you know?
But that's what I mean. I don't want, like, any Democrat out there like criticizing Trump for like a quote unquote bad deal. My point to you guys is like there almost isn't a bad deal for the US. A deal, like the US needs a deal because the two things that will accelerate, first of all, one thing that will not accelerate is just the truth. US can fly over Iran with its fighter jets and its planes, whatever it wants. That is the reality of today. But one thing that will accelerate is that we will get alternatives to the Strait of Hormuz because we'll build these pipelines. We'll find overland routes for, other things. And God bless Qataris, they're just going to pay Iran, clearly, even though they're denying it. They're going to pay Iran to get their LNG, urea, and helium through. And so, 12, 18 months from now, we are in a better position if the war needs to be restarted. So why not make a deal? And I'm shocked that President Trump has not made this point publicly. Obviously, it's kind of uncomfortable because you're kind of negotiating with Iran. You know what I mean? So you can't be like, don't worry about it. I'm going to pump him next year after the midterm.
Also, let's be gentle with the president. He's also been a little bit busy forcing his acting attorney general to create a slush fund for him to do whatever he wants with all these protesters and the massive amount of corruption that's happening at the domestic level. But we won't go into that because I'm sure you guys don't want to hear about my TDS, even though the level of domestic corruption that is happening in the United States is absolutely mind-boggling. They have flooded the zone with so much that it's just and by the way, we're creating this slush fund and we're never going to look into the Trump family or the Trump family businesses taxes ever again. Okay, sure. We'll just accept that that's normal. But there's a couple points I want to make into what you're saying. The first is you can sort of see Iran shifting on this because I don't know if you've noticed they've gone from talking about it as a toll to an environmental tax to protect local marine environments in conjunction with Oman. So tip beautiful. Of the cap. I love it.
Honestly, everything Iran has done on the PR marketing side is just my respect for the Islamic Republic has just gone through the roof. The Lego movies, the shit posting on X, and then this final coup de grace where you're environmental fee. It's a small environmental
This is not about oil. This is about local marine environments in the Strait of Hormuz, which have been terribly treated.
It's the sanitation, Iranians are into sanitation. There you go.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is because I think 18 months is a little ambitious. Although when the Saudis start pulling their money out of golf and soccer and all these big cities and everything else, and they're like, okay, what are they going to do with all that money? They're going to get a bunch of Pakistani migrant workers and they're going to dig through the desert for as long as it takes to get that pipeline up and running.
It's flat.
They'll be doing that.
It's not you're fighting through mountains, dude. You just,
But to your point, in 18 to 24 months or however long it takes, Iran is going to have a competitor for the Strait of Hormuz. And then it's going to be incumbent on Iran to make the Strait of Hormuz a more predictable and easier and cheaper passage than some of these pipelines. And so they have to start doing that now, because if they can't start building that narrative, when you can go around the Strait of Hormuz, you're going to go around the Strait of Hormuz. And they only have this leverage for as long as the Strait of Hormuz is important, which is why they have to stick with it now.
Jacob, this was my point from the beginning. Iran's leverage is not infinite and it's not static. Mm-hmm. And they have to monetize it now before people start starving in South Asia because of fertilizer shortages, before South Korea can't build chips because of helium, and because their benefactor, their ally China, starts dealing with higher food prices, which has traditionally been a political risk for China. So Iran has a short period of time, and also it has a short period of time because eventually you don't want to completely encourage everyone to move away from Hormuz. That's the problem for them, because then they can't charge anyone anything.
Well, and that's going to be fundamentally good for the world. If you have the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Iranians all competing for who has the best way to transport the oil out, now you have a market that's functioning. Now you have competition. Now it's about, who can provide the best service and the most reliable transit. Exactly. And so that geography is going to change now for the first time in decades, for half a century. You can be as hyperbolic as you want there. I think the one place where we can both, I'm going to sort of have it both ways here. I'm going to criticize Trump, and then I'm going to offer some silver linings where this might actually be different. The contours of the deal that are coming up, let's be very, very clear. They're awful from the United States perspective. The folks that are patting Iran on the back are patting Iran on the back because Iran is getting everything that it wanted and more. They're not going to get rid of the enriched uranium. Oh, they're going to get rid of it to China, or none of that is going to be real. You don't trust Chinese inflation statistics. I don't know why you would expect to trust that China has got this uranium. They're going to unfreeze tens of billions of dollars worth of Iranian assets. We'll see where the last number ends. How many, card-carrying, anti-Iran, foaming at the mouth neocon Republicans were foaming over the the Democrats and the JCPOA and Biden giving these billions of dollars to Iran. You're going to give more money to Iran, just to be clear, as a result of this deal. You, the Republicans, the anti-Iranians. The regime is firmer than it's ever been before. Good job in setting up Moshtaba for the next 40 years and IRGC dominance probably of Iran for the next 10 or 20. So like you are having a worse version of the JCPOA, and that's like objectively true. That's not TDS. Those are the facts. Now, the one thing I'm going to say here, and this is where I think the deal might be different. The JCPOA was built on the United States and Iran and a couple of European powers, the Russians, and I forget what did France and Germany have a say in there, the IEA, the IAEA, whatever. Like they were the ones who were guaranteeing the deal and making it legitimate. It sounds like the contours of this deal, it's not going to be about Russia and some European powers and anything else like that. It's going to be the powers in the region itself. It's going to be Egypt and Pakistan and Qatar and all these countries that are around Iran. And they're going to have to deal with Iran pragmatically, and they're going to have to guarantee the deal. And China, the one that actually cares about importing things out of the Strait of Hormuz, not the United States, which can close it whenever it wants because it can deal with it in ways that other countries can't. It's going to be involved, apparently, whether it's I don't believe in the window dressing about uranium, but you're right. China's going to play an active role here. So objectively, it's a worse deal than the JCPOA. I don't think the United States gets a whole heck of a lot out of this. But if you're just thinking about it from the point of view of the global economy, if we're here 3 years from now and the Iranian regime is relatively stable and you have multiple options for how to get oil out of this region, and you have a regional network of countries who, instead of squabbling with each other, are dealing with each other because they came to the precipice and realized, oh my God, if the United States is just going to bomb everything, it's going to be terrible for all of us. We better figure out how to play nice with each other. Otherwise, things are going to go bad. That part of it might be different and might be good for the global economy. I don't think you can put lipstick on the pig from the United States point of view. The United States has achieved no strategic objectives. It will not achieve any strategic objectives that it's asked for, and it will have diminished its own influence in this part of the world for no real gain. But I think if you're looking at it from the global economic point of view, it sucks now. It's going to suck for at least 12 months. But it does start to point to maybe something better. Like that's where I'm starting to land. I don't know if you feel that way, but
So first, let me build a case for why it's better than JCPOA, in objective like ways. Well, JCPOA was not preceded with a 5-week campaign to erode Iran's capabilities. I mean, I think like you are focusing very much on deal going forward, but we can't forget what happened over the last 3 months, which is that Iran did get attacked for 5 weeks by two of the best 5 air forces on the planet in an intense bombing campaign. Like they have been set back. And,
yes,
like that's just an objective fact. The second thing is I'm not sure that Iran's going to be great going forward. Like ending of
yep, that's a fair
sanctions,
critique.
like I think, look, I think this is what happened to my homeland of Serbia. Like it got bombed in the spring of 1999. The war ended. Serbia objectively lost, unlike Iran, right? So it had to withdraw from Kosovo. But like the strain of the bombing eventually like showed up, and 18 months later, in October of 2000, there was a revolution and Milosevic was out. So just like I do think that there can be this echo reaction where at some point Iran has to deal with the domestic unrest again, or
Yeah.
more likely, as one of my friends that is kind of an insider in Iran, and has tried to set up the financial system there and is now like left the regime, obviously. Like there is this other alternative where the IRGC kind of just moves Iran into that Egyptian style military
Mhm.
dictatorship, but there is still a regime change. Which again, to your point, that would be great. That would be great for the region if there was regime calibration. But in that way, I think you can give Trump like some credit for that military action at least. But again, all that said, then he needs to land this plane. The problem is, to your point, like how is it suddenly that he cares about criticism?
Yeah.
You
You
know,
care what Ted Cruz says about you? What are
I'll
you
tell you
doing,
why. But
President
I'll
Trump?
tell you why.
Why?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. So, yes, I think 8 out of 10 times Trump is nimble and can do whatever he wants. It's when the criticism is based on weakness. That's when his ego gets in the way. Because look, I mean, like what I would say to the president right now, if I was in the White House, I would like, President Trump, you got to bomb Iran for 5 weeks. You got to erode their missile capabilities, drone capabilities, sink their entire navy, set the nuclear program way back. And now you're going to do JCPOA, which is fine. It's fine because it's JCPOA post bombing. That's, of course, objectively superior to the Obama alternative, which did not have 5 weeks of bomb. Although I salute Obama for getting it done without the military. Like, that's great diplomacy. Well done. But this sets Iran back. Who knows where that 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium is? It's probably 40 meters under Fordow. So what are we even talking about? And you set the region, as Jacob Shapiro has said, on course for course correction, where these countries take more responsibility for their own security, reducing America's burden. And on top of that, who knows? Maybe the people of Iran do say, like, 18 months from now, well, this sucked. Why are we like living this regime? I just don't understand why he, doesn't emphasize some of those things more. And I guess he has tried to. He's just, still gets like, he, I guess, watches a Mark Levine segment on Fox News and is like, oh shit. I gotta.
Well, there's another point. I mean, you brought up Cory Booker, like whatever. Nobody cares about Cory Booker. But I brought up Bill Cassidy, who lost his primary here in Louisiana, and he joined 3 other Republican senators a couple days ago in voting for a Senate resolution to advance a war powers resolution against President Trump to withdraw all U.S. armed forces in the region. And this is another domestic issue I think President Trump is going to have to deal with, because he had some success in primaries in getting rid of some of these folks that he didn't like who voted to impeach him or whatever other gripes that he has with them. These guys are now lame ducks. Like, they have no reason now not to take shots at him, and they're going to take shots. So the Republican senators are going to start coming. The Republican congressmen are going to start coming. And you know what they can do? They can show a CPI print and say, this is why I'm getting off the boat, because you've raised prices for Americans and that economic story is terrible. And Trump's polling is terrible sort of across the board here. So I think you're right. Your critique about, is Iran going to be stable in 18 months? Yeah, that's one of the biggest problems with what I just said. And if it's not stable, I mean, this is a country with multiple armies, multiple paramilitary organizations. Like, all it takes is a little bit to mess up Strait of Hormuz. What happens if Iran becomes hell-bent on discovering drone technology to break undersand pipelines in the Emirates and Saudi Arabia? Like, what if this becomes an arms race for how you destroy those things? Maybe they'll create AI powered robotic sandworms, and they'll be going into the desert and like destroying the Saudi and Emirati pipelines that are going through. So like, maybe you get that sort of version. But I think the other really scary version of this is what you just said, that President Trump, for whatever reason, can't tolerate the weakness that's being the narrative about weakness that's being thrown at him, and he's going to show off just how strong he can really be, and that he's going to feel like he really needs to deliver a message. And
So
if
that's the
that
risk.
means like
That's the risk.
reopening a can of whoop ass on Iran for 3 weeks, now like we should already be pretty concerned. I don't know if you saw cousin Rory lighting himself on fire over the past couple of days because the deal says 30 days to open up the strait, and he's like, what do you mean 30 more days? Like, we need the strait open now. But
Well, listen, a couple of things like we gotta just understand here. Like, everything is lining up towards some sort of de-escalation. And part of the reason is what you just said. I mean, Massey has been primaried, but he is not going to leave his seat until January of 2027. Cassidy, Tom Tillis, just a slew of Republicans who are basically, Cornyn. What do you think is going to happen
Cornyn.
if Cornyn loses his primary because Trump chose Cox? Like, effectively, like, we just cited 3 Republican senators. Boom, poof, there goes your majority in the Senate.
Well, they've already got 4 Republican senators. So, I mean, you add a couple more. Now we're starting to get to that 60 number, and things are getting worse. In the House, it's harder, but in the Senate, like, he's already lost that game.
And this is why it's important. It's important because, like, it's just going to get worse after the midterms. But the point that you and I are articulating, it's already bad. He needs all these people somehow on his side, and that requires, like, basically putting down, landing the plane on the conflict. Now, last year, a lot of people thought the same thing, that he would never be able to land the plane on various trade deals as well, and that he didn't want to take a loss, didn't want to take an L. Um, and he ended up like basically making trade deals, even though there were, Iran hawks are equivalent to like trade hawks. The trade hawks ended up being betrayed as well.
They did.
Um, so that would be my counter, that he's incapable of like quote unquote facing the Trump chickened out narrative. He can. I think even on this issue, particularly on this issue, actually, because fighting Iran was never his like lifelong dream, whereas tariffs were. So just keep that in mind. Like this is not John
Mhm.
Bolton we're talking about.
Yeah. All right. I think that was a good 30 minutes. Anything else we need to say about this before we turn over to our six pack here?
No. I'm checking. I'm checking if anything happened while we were talking about it. No, not yet. Oh,
All right.
here's one. Oh, wait. Here's one. Our cousin Rory was very alarmed a couple of minutes ago. Rory Johnson, commodity expert and just generally great guy, fellow Canadian. He posted on X that Wall Street Journal was saying that U.S. Navy was restarting escorts through the Strait of Hormuz, which would be kind of aggressive. And then U.S. Central Command just denied those reports. So yeah, I think
Mhm.
that like, look, it's right now we're recording this at what was it, like 1 p.m. Oh, sorry, yeah, 1 p.m.
1 p.m.
Eastern time.
Eastern. Yep.
Like the attacks by the U.S. happened about 12 hours ago. Would you say?
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah. So
And the Israelis are ongoing, by the way. We haven't talked about the spoiler role that the Israelis will play in all
I
of this.
mean, I don't think Iran is serious when they rope Lebanon into this. I don't think they are. I think, I mean, if from Tehran's perspective, what you want is U.S. and Israel split. You want them split. You
Mhm.
want Israel to attack you, and you want U.S. to say, "Not us. Feel free to retaliate against their civilians." Like that is what you want. That's the world that you are praying for. And so I'm not sure that Iran is going to tie Lebanon into this, because I think what they want is a continued state of war with Israel, while illustrating to the entire world, but particularly Israelis, that they no longer have full support of the US effectively, that the US made a deal of its own. That would be
Once
ideal.
we had a listener who wrote in, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name now off the top of my head, who questioned at least my ranking of Benjamin Netanyahu on our trade value leader index. And I think the point you just made is very salient. And it goes to that point I said about the silver lining of this Trump version of the JCPOA. Because yes, Israel has had an extraordinary couple of years and it's secured itself in ways that I didn't think was possible 3, 4 years ago. But look at the coalition of countries that is now lining up against Israel. You have often said, oh, Iran is going to get blamed by the world, and there's going to be a coalition to go after Iran to open up the strait. You know who usually gets blamed by the world when bad things happen? It's not Iran. There's another country with a small minority of human beings who often get blamed for things and actually did play a major role in starting this whole conflict. I bet that they're going to get some of that blame. And when you start getting all these different Muslim countries of different sects and different ethnicities and different even languages starting to come together, like it's looking awfully lonely there for Israel. So yeah, you did some good short-term work, BB, but like the long term in the picture that cousin and I are painting is not particularly good. I'm with you
Yeah.
there. Okay. Six pack time. Um
Well, this is part of the six pack. I mean, this is
yeah, this
the
is that
first
was yeah,
the
that
first
was
app.
yeah. We started with a double and now we'll go into some of the others. Um all right. Let's talk about Ebola for a second. Can I just get this off my chest? Can I get this Ebola thing off my chest? Okay. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that what 10 days ago now, 9 days ago now, the DRC announced that it had tested and had confirmed 8 samples of Ebola. It's a new, not a new, there are 4 different strains of Ebola viruses that cause disease in human beings. This one, I don't even really know how to pronounce it. Is it Bundibugyo? I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. It's a hard name to pronounce. This is the rarest of the strains. It was only first discovered in 2007. It was so rare that all of the researchers and that have that have been working on Ebola vaccines and treatments and tests, they never did anything for this one. One of the reasons that it took so long to figure out that this was an Ebola virus was because the tests that they had on the ground there didn't detect this variant. So even though they were testing samples, like the normal tests don't test for this variant. So for weeks, this was probably spreading and nobody sort of knew. And there's no vaccine, there's no treatment. For the bigger strain, like the Zaire strain of Ebola virus, there actually is now a vaccine and it's relatively effective. So it's scary, but you have tools to try and limit the spread. We don't have that with this one. Now, the WHO says we might be able to have one in 6 to 9 months, and bookmark that. I'm going to come back to that 6 to 9 month point. But today, we don't really have a lot of ways to prevent this. In part because they weren't testing for this particular variant, in part because Elon Musk and Doge cut a lot of the US funding for pandemic prevention and disease prevention and things like that. You might remember last February, Elon Musk sort of joked, "Oh, we accidentally cut Ebola prevention while we were doing all of our work. We quickly restored it, don't worry, but we did accidentally cut it for like a week." Like that was literally last February. So part of the issue here is that there's just less money. There's fewer resources to go around and test for these things, which is why it started. And also the epicenter of this is in the Eastern DRC, which is full of nice minerals and copper and cobalt and things that everybody wants, but is also basically a war zone with millions of people displaced, with people killing each other all the time. So it's sort of the worst possible environment that you could have an outbreak start with. To give you some frame of just how bad this is going to be, as of today, the WHO has reported about 800, 900 cases overall. The biggest Ebola outbreak was in 2014 to 2016. It took 100 days from when we realized there was a breakout to get to 1,000 cases. We're at like day 9. So that tells you how fast things have spread here. It's also not just in one place in the DRC now. It is all over the DRC. It's in Uganda. It's in some other places. There have been some weird reports about how it's spreading. Those are probably not true. That's probably hysteria and melodrama. Probably this has been out there for a while and people didn't know they were exposed to somebody that they were caring for that was sick. But that's something that you have to worry about too. Okay, that's like sort of the background. I just want to say a couple of things, cousin, and then I'll let you talk. First of all, and I'm going to get a little woke here. You know why we cared so much more about the hantavirus thing with the cruise ship and we're freaking out about? I was getting questions from clients for weeks about this hantavirus scare and oh my God, am I going to get hantavirus? And nobody's been asking me about Ebola. I've been having to bring up Ebola to my clients in general, even though we're freaking out about hantavirus. Senator Kennedy has been tweeting about how they're going to have research into hantavirus vaccines. He hasn't really said anything about Ebola other than that it's under control. The reason I think that that is true is because Ebola is primarily going to kill and affect brown people, period. The people who are on that cruise with the hantavirus and everything else like that, they were paying tens of thousands of dollars for this Antarctic cruise and looking at all these different things in general. This outbreak of Ebola, it's going to kill at least tens of thousands of people. It's not going to be a global pandemic because Ebola is too deadly for that, and it also isn't spread airborne. You sort of have to be in contact with bodily fluids. But it's going to be a huge regional epidemic, and it's going to be extremely hard to get it under control. So the human toll and suffering is going to be absolutely awful. And a lot of people are not going to care because it's going to be brown people in East Africa. So I just want to say that first. Second thing I want to say is that these things are eminently predictable. COVID, for example, was not a black swan. It did not come out of out of nothing. I actually found an NIH report from 2010 that predicted two things, cousin. It predicted that there would be more diseases jumping from animals to humans, and it identified a couple potential hotspots in the world where those diseases might jump. You know where one of them was? China, right around Wuhan. That was 2010. So we knew that this sort of thing was happening. And it's a combination of a couple different things. It's a combination of climate change. So temperatures are warmer, animals are living in different places, things like that. There's urbanization. So people are moving from towns and rural areas into cities. And so they're coming into contact with animals that they didn't come into contact with before. And then also globalization. Things move around more easily than they did before. So you get these three things working together. In the developed world, we think we've discovered many things. But if you're in sub-Saharan Africa, if you're in the poorer provincial regions of China, yeah, you're rubbing shoulders with animals and jungles and things that humans just haven't rubbed shoulders with. So you're going to have the opportunity for these things. And scientists have been talking about that for a long time. And because of that, control depends on early identification. It depends on globalization. It depends on having international institutions that you can trust, that are on the ground, that can identify these things quickly and move to prevent them from becoming global pandemics or regional epidemics or things like that. And I think one of the awful things that is happening as a result of deglobalization is that's not becoming true anymore. Go back to the global pandemic, COVID. China didn't share information about what it really had on its hands for weeks because it was worried about being weak in the trade war with the United States. It took the WHO far longer than it should have to declare an emergency here. After we knew what was going on, did the world come together and do like a version of Independence Day in that 1995 movie when the aliens were coming? No, we had hoarding of protective personal equipment. We had vaccine nationalism, my vaccine versus your vaccine. It was all refracted through geopolitics. So these sorts of things are going to get worse. And I don't think Ebola is going to be a pandemic. Like, I'm not that worried about it there. I don't want you to be hysterical, but you should take it seriously because there will be another disease like COVID. It will probably be much deadlier than COVID. And we won't trust the WHO and we won't trust our national governments because we botched the COVID lockdowns and everything else. And now there's no trust in institutions. In the United States, for example, trust in institutions is at a record low if you look at Pew data. So, what happens if you get, for example, a disease that is airborne, that is as transmissible as COVID, but is, say, as lethal as MERS, another coronavirus that sometimes has outbreaks? COVID was like what, 1%, maybe less than 1% mortality rate? Something like MERS is a 10% mortality rate. Or if you go up to Ebola in the 50-60% range, something like that. Like, if you get something like that, are we going to pay attention when it really comes and it's really going to happen? Okay, last thing. And this is where the TikTok camera should be on maybe a little bit. All of that said, the WHO just said we could have a vaccine for this Ebola virus in 6 to 9 months. Do you know how awesome that is? You know, if you could go back in time and say, hey, Europeans, we'll give you a vaccine to stop the Black Death and the spread of the bubonic plague in 6 to 9 months. You know how different the course of world history would be?
It'd be
If you could
terrible.
go,
That's why
well, yeah.
that's why we had the Renaissance. Like, fuck no. Like, you want the Black Plague. But anyways, go on.
Yeah. Or go to North America. What if they had realized that smallpox was decimating the native populations there? And they said, you know what? We should give smallpox vaccines to the Native Americans so that they don't all die. How different would American geopolitics be if there had been vaccines on a 6 to 9 month time?
Again, I don't think you're making a really good case for why we need vaccines. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Ooh, cutting hard. All I'm saying is we live at a time when human beings know more about treating diseases than ever before. And the idea that we could have a new Ebola vaccine in 6 months, the idea that Moderna had a COVID vaccine 2 days after they sequenced the virus, this is miraculous shit. It is absolutely awesome. So yeah, we don't have the WHO and we don't have trust in institutions and we don't have all these other things, but we are at the forefront of biotech research and things like that. And the reason Ebola is spreading right now in the Eastern DRC is not because of our lack of ability to stop it. It's because of our lack of political will to stop it. And honestly, we've spent millennia trying to figure out the ability. That was the hard one. It is mind-boggling to me that it's the political will that we're struggling with right now to give people vaccines and preventative treatment for viruses that we know are going to be out there, cough, measles, cough, and all these other sorts of things. And this is where I would say RFK Jr., you're not listening to this, but if anybody in the administration is listening to this, I see RFK Jr. going on podcasts and hosting podcasts talking about his crackpot theories about anything else. Mr. Secretary, will you get to fucking work? Can you stop this Ebola outbreak, please? And if you really want to come on podcast, come on the Cousins podcast. I challenge you to a pull-up contest while we're talking, and we can debate the virtues of vitamin A in preventing measles and how U.S. Armed Forces shouldn't have to take vaccines anymore. And Rand, what do you want to say?
Yeah, man. I mean, I guess Outbreak really made an impression on young Jacob when he watched. Probably were thinking about Rene Russo and her syringe game, which was not great. Like, holy shit, Rene. Like, I've had nightmares of that scene where she punctures her suit while trying to deal with an Ebola patient. So I teed you up with this one because I know this is like your passion. Various pathogens and how they're going to kill us all.
Or how they're not going to kill us all. They don't have to kill us all. That's what's so amazing.
No.
Like, they don't have to. It's awesome.
So I agree with everything you said. The one thing that I disagree a little bit is the woke aspect of this. Like, I was there in 2014, and people absolutely cared about Ebola outbreak in 2014. I mean, we cared so much that when that nurse came down with Ebola in the US, the bond market had like one of the largest single day sell-offs in history of mankind. So we've had attention to Ebola before. Perhaps one of the reasons that we have a blasé attitude today is because every previous Ebola outbreak ended up being a nothing burger. But the reason they were nothing burgers is because the United States of America led an international effort to do something about it. And I think one of the
Mhm.
greatest, like this is a problem, by the way, being a politician. Oftentimes, when you do something great, nobody knows you did something great because something terrible didn't happen. In this case, Obama, perhaps his greatest moment as the US president was the 2014 outbreak of Ebola. Like, sprung into action, overdid it in a way. Maybe it
Mhm.
was the SARS experience, but I mean, Obama handled this like it was a terrorist attack. And so it was arrested. And I remember at the time I was working at BCA Research. I was writing on like a weekly cadence during that Ebola outbreak because my clients in the financial industry did care about it. They did. They really, really did. And so the Obama administration did something about it. And this brings me to like a philosophical, you know, point. Just listening to your rant. What's interesting about it is the MAGA camp argues that it's realist. The MAGA camp argues that it's objective and that everyone else is basically ideological. And one of the points that the MAGA camp makes is very utilitarian and very like mathematical. In other words, look, if something doesn't serve American interests, we shouldn't be doing it. And their other argument is that the world has changed over the last 75 years. What a bunch of, you know, dudes in 1945 thought was good for America may not be good for America today. And I salute that. Like everything I just said, I can get on board with. So, for example, Hormuz and our previous discussion is a good example.
Mhm.
MAGA camp maybe has some good things to say. Like the United States of America doesn't import any crude from Hormuz, although the flow of energy out of Hormuz is in America's interest, but it's also in China's interest. It's also in Saudi Arabia's interest. Maybe the US should recalibrate the cost of securing Hormuz to its own interests. Well done. Golf clap for the MAGA camp. But where you start wondering whether the MAGA camp is truly calculative, rational, realist, and objective is when ideological issues do come up. For example, it is absolutely in America's interest to have early warning, early monitoring, and mitigation of global pandemics, even if they happen in the Congo, obviously. And so if you are against the WHO and you say, well, I'm MAGA and that's nonsense, no, then you're just ideological, you know? And maybe this isn't about doing things that are in America's interests. Maybe you just hate things you don't understand because you're an ignorant moron who doesn't understand why, yes, sometimes you do have to meet with foreigners in Geneva and make a fucking decision, or finance a bunch of, yeah, probably overpaid bureaucrats and doctors sitting in some office somewhere in the world to make sure that when this thing happens, it doesn't end up in fucking Kansas or Oklahoma. Okay. And that's where, like, to me, this is a great litmus test. If you're going around saying you're MAGA and it's like, hey, I want to do things that are good for America, then like something like this is a great example where, yeah, a globalist solution is needed because the pathogen is not going to fucking wait in line in front of a US consulate for a green card. You know what I mean? Or a tourist visa. It's just going to show the fuck up. There's my rant on top of your rant.
Yeah, I love it. And I'll just say, 2014 was a little different. Um, for one, I mean, one key reason was the Ebola vaccine wasn't there yet. So 2019 is when you get the Ebola vaccine. So 2014, we still don't have the tools to deal with it. And I know you're saying it ended up being a nothing burger. And I know you didn't mean it this way, but I would just point out, I mean, there were over 10,000 people dead in East Africa because of it. There were 30,000 plus people who were
No, but
infected. There
what
was a
I'm saying
moment there
is,
where even Dave Chappelle was joking about it when we were all
what I'm
wondering,
saying
should we
is,
be touching the bananas in the store because does it have Ebola? Like, it was truly terrifying. I'm
but
saying one of the reasons I go to the woke point right now is because you have the hantavirus comparison. By the way, pour one out for Gene Hackman, who died a
Yes,
horrible death
I was
because of
just going. Yeah, I was
coronavirus
thinking
too.
of that too.
Got to pour one out for him. So there's that. And also, we think we've fixed this. It's been a nothing burger before, so why should we
No,
be
but it is a
concerned about
nothing
this? They're
burger,
just going to quarantine it in East
Jacob.
Africa.
It's not. It's
Okay.
not a vaccine. It's not a vaccine. Ebola always is and will be a nothing burger, always, forever. And the reason for that is that what you said yourself in your rant, which is that its lethality is so high, like this is easily handled. It's easily quarantined. But in 2014, there was no vaccine, you're right, but the US did help those mitigation efforts.
Yeah.
It sent experts and doctors who had a role in ensuring that these villages are uh, isolated, that we do contact tracing within, there was fear that it was going to spread to Abuja and other places, and it didn't. And so, Ebola is a bad virus. We're not going to die of Ebola. It's not because of the vaccine. It's because of how it spreads, and it's because of how lethal it is. Um, but there, but U.S. effort will clearly mitigate the situation so that less people died. I mean, how many people would have died in 2014 if the U.S. wasn't involved, right?
Right.
And
That's when we had Erdogan. This is where I would push back against you a little bit because and I tried to say this in my rant. Like we're very late to this party. Like this thing has been circulating for weeks right now. So you're right. Is it a global pandemic? No. But could you get outbreaks in different places
100%.
throughout the world?
Agree.
And could you get much, much higher death figures? And could some of those outbreaks be in Western countries? Like I know the Eastern DRC is a no-go zone for many people, but the Chinese are all on the ground there, and the US is all on the ground there. President Trump was touting a potential rare earth deal with the DRC government just a couple of months ago. So it's an internationalized space, and everybody wants the things that are in the Eastern DRC, and millions of people have been displaced by the fighting there. And if we are 4 to 6 weeks behind on this right now, okay, like, yes, it's not going to be COVID-19. Like, you and I are probably not going to die from it. But could you have an outbreak somewhere because somebody brings it with them that they didn't know they'd been exposed, and then you have a huge outbreak in a major city, even maybe a Western?
That happened.
That's in the cards, you know?
Look, that happened in 2014. I mean, I remember I was trying to explain to my clients how many flights there are between Abuja and the rest of the world. I mean, 20 people in Nigeria got Ebola. This was the outbreak that was focused on Sierra Leone and Liberia. But
Mhm.
20 people in Nigeria got it. And, there was a moment there when I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Nigerian urban environments are massive. You're talking huge, multi-million people cities. Like, how are we going to contain this? Good news is we did contain it. And that's where I don't think that Ebola is the virus. I think that's where there's an element of what you're noticing is I think we've experienced this. As you say, there is a vaccine, but even when there wasn't, it didn't really spread. Regardless, you have a very important point. You and I might disagree in how alarmed we are about this, but the issue is that if the US doesn't get involved, if it's not present on an international scene to deal with this in a totally globalist way, and I use that term because the MAGA camp loves to throw it around. This is one issue where if you're not a globalist, you're just a fucking moron. There is no mitigating way to say it. You are just an ignorant fool, and you're actually not interested in American interests. You're just afraid of what you don't understand. And what you don't understand is that the world is interconnected. You probably need a fucking degree to navigate it. And you should just go back to fixing old Chevy trucks because you're just a moron, in fact, who doesn't understand how the world works. So again, Hormuz Strait, sure, the world has passed American security guarantees by. It is in American interest to maybe reconsider on that front and recalibrate that. Yeah, maybe the elites, the CFR elites running around writing op-eds are wrong. But on this issue, there's just no debate, man. US should have a huge medical presence right now in the Congo figuring this stuff out because, number one, it's good for training. Number two, it could get out of hand. And number three, you've got to have these relationship with the rest of the world because I'm far more worried about a virus that doesn't kill as many people as Ebola, but spreads much more easily as a result of it, such as COVID. And then we can't just like hide, because as we saw, like closing the borders clearly is not a bad idea. By the way, it's not a bad idea. You should close the borders. Why not? But it doesn't prevent viruses from spreading, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. What's next? You want to talk about China stepping up? You want to talk about the Ottoman Empire protests? Is there something else on your six-pack list?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting. We had some turbulence in the former Ottoman Empire. We had one of the
The former,
largest, the former
former.
Ottoman. Yeah, so like you can talk about Turkey. I was actually in Belgrade, Serbia over the weekend, and it was great to be back in my hometown. I gotta say, like I haven't been in Serbia, I think in 7 years or so. Yeah, so it's been a while, and it was great. It was great. Like it looks great. Like actually, I took a plane. It was funny. One of our fans, by the way, shout out. I forgot his name though. Unfortunately, he was going to his bachelor party. So congratulations to him. Just saw me in the line at the Luton airport, taking a Wizz Air flight to Belgrade. And as somebody who grew up in Serbia, like what really put a smile on my face is that 80% of that plane was tourists. That was awesome. That was really great to see. So I'm really, really happy that that's the case. On some very basic level, if your country is attracting tourists, like at least it checks the box that like most people are not afraid of getting stabbed. Like that's awesome. And
Yeah.
I left Serbia in 1994, where you definitely were at risk of getting stabbed, even if you were a 12-year-old just walking to school. Like if you had like basketball shoes on, you were at risk of getting stabbed. And so I think that was great. There's a lot of improvement in Serbia that I saw, but it was also the weekend where we had a huge student protest against the government that doesn't seem to be letting down. And so this connects back to our narrative about the Gen Z. I know we talked about Nepal. We talked about where else? Oh yeah, Sri Lanka. Right. So and it made me think of something like basically students in Serbia, there was this incident last year where a roof collapsed at a train station. It was clearly poorly constructed. Somebody fucked up somewhere down the line. Um, and a lot of people died. Like I think 19 people died. We should fact check that. But also it wasn't like 100 people that died. Not that 19 is like little. What I'm saying is it's intriguing how much protest it brought against the government. Like this was the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's intriguing. And I think that this is something I brought up before on our podcast. I think what we don't understand about the Gen Z is that they're so connected in social media that if your country has just had like 5 to 10 to 15 years of like stability, safety, and economic growth, the Gen Z just their standards are so high for what the country should look like, for what the institution should look like, because they're connected. They're playing Fortnite with friends in Italy or Brazil or Canada. They have Instagram. They have TikTok. They see how China's progressing, quite frankly. Like if you're in the global south, you're like, well, China was like dirt poor 20, 30 years ago. Look at them now. Why can't we be that? And there was another thing I wanted to tell you about this, because recently I spent some time with a dear friend from Australia, and he here in Los Angeles. I was driving him between Newport and LA, so we got a lot of time in the car together. And he brought his 15-year-old, and I had my 17-year-old girl. So two girls in the back. On the drive from Newport to LA, they were very quiet, teenagers. They don't know each other. On the way back, like me and my friend couldn't even talk over them. they just instantly clicked, and they were playing music and everything. And the reason I bring this up, one of the girls grew up in Australia all her life. Mine grew up between Quebec, Texas, and California. And obviously they're both from like first world countries. It's not that different. I'm just not sure they would have clicked as much as they did. Like, because I was listening to their conversation. I mean, again, me and my friend couldn't actually talk over them. But the things they were talking about, they knew everything. Like they were so connected on every single thing. I'm not sure that was the case in the 1970s. Maybe they
Hmm.
would have talked about the Beatles, fine, whatever, but they would not have like just had all these cues, all this slang. It was just so perfect. It was as if they lived down the street from one another. So what am I getting at? I'm just getting at the fact that like over the next 5 years, I think maybe the biggest geopolitical story is that there's just going to be nonstop protests by the Gen Z. I think what we're seeing is like just kernels of this coming revolution, and the revolution is a product of social media. These kids, whether you grew up in Australia or Canada or you grew up in Serbia, like what is the difference? You have access to exactly like Netflix subscription is not that much, like yes,
Hmm.
the average Serbian salary is like I think it's like 1,200 euros. Fine. But you know what you can pay for Netflix? You can watch the same things on YouTube. It just doesn't take that much. And so the leadership of these countries, they are victims of their own success in many ways. So like the Serbian president Aleksandar Vucic, he keeps going on TV and being like, "But look at the GDP growth." Or he will say things like, "But debt to GDP has gone down from 70 to 40%. Come on." And it's like, yeah, but like the kids have Instagram, man. What do you want? And the fact and the fact that you brought economic growth to them is the reason they're pissed because their standards are now much higher than 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or certainly when I grew up in the country in like the 90s when it was like dystopian, collapse of society. So that's what I wanted to bring up. I mean, we've talked about this before. I just think that there is this connectivity between that generation and their standards are just like first world level. Like that's almost like invariably going to bring up more drama.
It's amazing how many politicians are making the same mistake that Joe Biden did in 2022. And President Trump is making it now too. When you were saying that Alexander Vucic is taking out a chart and saying, look at how good things are. Like Biden was doing that too. It is like inflation is over 5% or whatever what he was. And he's like, no, this is the greatest economy ever. Look at all these objective indicators. And it's like, dude, it's not. Like, I don't feel that way. So it's not that way. There's also an NBA metaphor here, I think, because the way that NBA fandom, and this I think is true of sports in general, maybe not of baseball, but we could interrogate that a little bit more. But young people root for brands, not for
Yeah.
hometown teams anymore. It's like I
Yeah.
want to be like Steph. I saw that version of basketball. I'm a Steph fan. I'm a Jalen Brunson fan. I'm no longer like a Warriors fan or a Knicks fan, which then goes to your own country. Like if you're Gen Z in Nepal, you don't care. Like to your point, if you want to extend the metaphor, it's stretching it a little bit, but it's not about
No, I
Nepal. It's
see it.
I want this brand. I want like to
No,
be like how everybody
no,
else is.
no, 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 no. You're absolutely right. Like, why did you become, an Atlanta Hawks fan? Well, you grew up in Atlanta. Your family's from Atlanta. Your dad took you to Atlanta Hawks games. Whatever.
Hmm.
Point is, the point is that we were much more rooted in that locality, and we did not make cross country comparisons as much. And I think that, to your point about fandom, there are people who travel with LeBron. They travel teams. They become Laker fans when he's a Laker. That is something that is happening right now, and I think that on one hand, it's very encouraging because it does suggest that this Gen Z is going to be far more cynical about like like weaponized nationalism. They might be patriotic, but they will be a lot more cynical of like, oh, let's go to war because those people are evil. It's like, well, I don't know. Like I got buddies on TikTok; they seem pretty good. But and that connectivity matters. But I think the other issue is the downside is this. Here's the downside. The downside is that Gen Z is doing this at a time when institutions have lost value, when they've lost, people have lost their acceptance of them. So as you were saying earlier, in the context of the US, I mean, that's happened broadly. And also there is no necessarily paradigm. And so one of the interesting things is it's extremely commendable that the students in Belgrade want a first world country. They are protesting against corruption. That's commendable. Like, that's incredible. That's awesome. But then I listened to some of the speeches of the folks they brought to the campaign rally. I was listening to and it was a lot of technocrats that came, but it was also like farmers, union leaders. And it was like, wait a minute, but they don't have any idea how to fix this. Like if they
Mhm.
so this is what's concerning. We don't have an anchor ideologically in where we should be. And so the danger here is that the Gen Z does get into power before they have an idea of what to do. They'll be like a dog that catches a car. What are you going to do now? All right, you're in charge. We'll see, our boy in Nepal, right? That we're watching. Like, what is he going to do? How is he going to govern? And some of the speeches at this event in Belgrade were kind of, pretty leftist extremist, like every teacher should have a huge salary and we should educate everyone and like it'll be awesome when we do that. And you're like, how are you going to pay for that?
Yeah, they think it's easy, like because they don't remember what it was like to not have the internet or to have to wait for the VHS to come out or have to get the
Well, it's just
DVD in
that
the mail from Netflix.
again, like they want the country to be run on first world standards, yes, but there is no like actual plan, like so what is, there's this kind of a sense like, well, like the president of Serbia is bad because he's corrupt, but then capitalism is also bad because he's kind of like pro market, pro business, capitalist, whatever. There's no sense like, well, no, like capitalism is not bad. We can do everything together. Like we can be not corrupt and have competition. It just seemed that like they were not really focused on what it is that they're going to do about it. And
Well, yeah, because there's an element of not knowing how things work and then not having the
exactly.
patience and discipline to do the hard work to get it, which is why what you're alluding to with these leftist sort of types of Gen Z politics. I don't know if you saw, we got some hate mail about our take on AOC. We can come back to that
Oh
maybe
no
another
way.
time because I think listeners kind of took the wrong message from it. Which also, by the way, the fact that we got so many comments about AOC told me that maybe she has more legs than I thought because she's hitting the
What
button.
were
Even
the
if you don't like her,
what was the hate
I,
mail?
I I gotta prep it. I'll prep it for you. There's a whole
All right,
list
we'll
of
do a
stuff. We'll
mailbag.
we'll
We
we'll,
got to
we'll
do a
do it next
mailbag
time.
episode.
We'll
Yeah,
we'll do
okay.
a mailbag around it. But the point being, like, if you're Gen Z and you think it's easy, to your point, you're going to get into power, and then you're going to realize you don't know how anything works, and you just want to make it easy. And so, what do? Okay, let's tax the billionaires. Like, let's take it from them and let's redistribute some wealth, and then we'll go back to like whatever we're doing on our phone. The other thing I wanted to ask you though is because I think you're right in a certain sense, but what if your daughter had been with a 17-year-old person from China, where the internet is being controlled and where they have a fundamentally different experience of the world. And I know that that's not going to map on like most people. Like if you're in India, probably you have a lot more in common, like with your daughter and my daughters and things like that. But there is a trend of countries and a trend with billions of people. Russia does this too, of governments controlling information that's available there, controlling access to platforms. You've also seen in Western governments now understanding some of the dark parts of these social media accounts and how it creates unrealistic expectations and how that leads to anxiety and depression. Like, do you think that that could lead to the opposite of what you're talking about? That there will actually be blocks of people who are more isolated from each other and they won't have that shared language. And so they will be even more incomprehensible to each other. And then they'll be willing to fight each other because they don't understand each other. I don't know. Does that question make sense?
It's interesting you say that because I had recently a dear friend of mine come visit me from China, and he brought my kids. What at the time I didn't know what they were, and then I found out they were Labubus. But he whipped one out of his bag to hand it to my kids, and my two
Hmm.
girls, the at the time 16 and the 7-year-old, almost like had a physical fight over it. And I was like, "What the fuck is that little gremlin looking thing? That's hilarious." But like, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure China fits the kind of completely separate. I think that they would have things to talk about that are similar.
Well, that's something that should scare the Chinese Communist Party to its bones then. If it's
I
if
think
it's raising hundreds of millions of people who have more in common with your daughter than with like their Chinese parents, like that would be
well, listen, we
like
blew past our six pack, and that's fine. You know why? Because we're getting to something that I think is really interesting. I haven't had time to articulate it or think about it. But in a way, it should scare anyone who has a deep emotional and ideological and philosophical commitment with nation states. You know,
mm.
metaverse, like if you utter the word metaverse, people immediately assume you have whatever IQ you have, it's half of it. It's been universally panned and reviled as a concept, but I actually think we're already in it. Like
Mhm.
that's what we're talking about. It's the fact that yeah, if a kid came from China and hung out with my daughter, like they would probably have, watch some NBA highlights. They would probably, share similar things. Like what I'm getting at is that because of the the social media and the electronic world is so much easier to like circulate, we're undermining the sinews that built our countries together. And I think one of the rise of MAGA and American nationalism, I think, in some level, is against that. Like, how do you get kids to understand they're American? Well, having them stay on TikTok for hours on end probably is not a way to do that. And that's where I think that, that's a bigger question that we have. Like,
Well, and it's funny. There's a paradox in what you're saying, because the paradox is, in that car ride that you're talking about, their shared vocabulary for different cultural totems allowed them to connect quicker and more deeply than it would have if it was you and me in the 1970s or 1980s or whenever we would have been meeting. So it enabled human connection. But one of the biggest worries about all of these things is that it actually degrades human connection. Instead of kids going out and playing with each other,
yes,
they're
it
on
does.
Fortnite, they're on video games. So like it's like
But you
is
know
it
what?
degrading human connection? Is it enabling it? Is it doing both at the same time? Like I don't know.
I think for us, for our generation, and certainly for baby boomers who go on like worldnews.com and they don't understand it's completely garbage, like the baby boomers are just fucking lost because they don't know how to deal with this.
Sure.
Millennials, millennials are depressed, and I think we go into our like little weird angles, like little groups on Twitter and stuff. So you're right, but I think Gen Z and Alpha, they're just beyond it, and I think that they are comfortable making friends online. They have that shared experience, and so I think that I think they're experiencing the world in profoundly different ways from the way we are. And by the way, for all of you who think this is a completely idiotic rant, if you read about nationalism, nationalism is not normal. It is
No,
not.
it's relatively new.
It's relatively new. It's an ideology, and it was propagated by teachers. That's why teacher colleges, schools for producing teachers in Central, Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, they were the sort of that's where nation states were created, manufactured as the famous manufacturing. What is it? Manufacturing communities. Um,
Imagining communities, Benedict
sorry,
Anderson.
Benedict Anderson, Imagine Communities. Great book, very
See,
short.
who
Read
who
it.
who needs Chat GPT? Just put a coin in the Jacob jukebox. I still
Well,
got it. I can spit it out.
we're cousins, like this is what happens. We like complete each other's sentences. But so in the 19th century, you needed to tell peasants, turning peasants into Frenchmen. David Bell,
Hmm.
I think. Right? These are all books about like how did countries actually become what they are. Now, somebody in the MAGA camp will say, well, fuck that. America's America. Well, okay, cool story, bro. But no, you needed to tell somebody who did not consider themselves French or Italian or Serbian or Czech or whatever, and tell them, no, you're actually Czech. And it was actually these teaching universities that were the innovators of this new intellectual technology nationalism. And it's very modern and very recent. It's basically like, 200 years old. And I think that when you take the child out of church, when you take the child out of school, when you take the child out of family, and you let them stare at a screen in their room for 4, 6 hours a day, which is what many kids today are doing, oh boy, are you eroding that technology. Like they're getting a new software updated. And no, it's not the Chinese fucking Communist Party through TikTok. No, it's their own software.
Yeah, I would add some color too to what you're talking about, because one of the reasons you have nationalism, you're displacing two forces that were political organizing principles before then. You were displacing multi-ethnic monarchies, and these monarchies and empires were dependent on the divine right of an emperor or a king. So you were displacing these multi-ethnic empires, and you were also displacing the role of God at the center of the state. And so nationalism was the new thing that replaced these things as the ideology that bound people together. And one of the reasons you needed it, and one of the reasons it worked, precisely to your point, was because of the Industrial Revolution, because the average European worker's relationship with work and with their occupation and with how big their family was and where they got things fundamentally changed. And as they moved from farms and cottage industries into the city, and they weren't around their family anymore, and they weren't working in the field anymore, they were in a factory and they had no meaning, you had to inject with this meeting. And I think one of the things you're seizing on is that, and there have been, what was it? Who wrote? Was it Industry 3.0 or whatever it was about the third industrial revolution? That German guy, or was it a Swiss guy? I forget. But
Yeah.
if we really are on the cusp of a new industrial revolution, and AI and robotics and all these things are going to change everything, then necessarily the youth are going to have a different relationship with the state and with their governing structures than we did before. And I think you're right to point out that maybe nationalism is old. Maybe it doesn't work. And nationalism, again, it's also a European industrial revolution context. What if China is more of the center of economic gravity in the world? I'm just going to say it for the sake of argument. We can argue about it in general. I mean, they just hosted Trump, and then they hosted Putin, and now they're hosting Pakistan, and they're opening up the Strait of Hormuz, and they're the ones who make things. Like, what if the next conceptualization or the next ism that we use to organize ourselves has nothing to do with, some
Right.
19th century mode of European
Well,
organization?
what if
I
AI
don't know.
what if AI underpins it globally, and then Gen Z has to fight back because they're the ones that are gonna be hurt the most? Uh,
Hmm.
by the way, yes, Benedict Anderson, Imagine Communities, great book on this theme. Also, Peasants into Frenchmen, I was wrong, it's not David Bell, it is Eugene Weber.
Mm.
David Bell, however, is a great historian on France, and The Cult of the Nation in France is a book that's really good. Basically, all three of these books effectively, particularly David Bell's The Cult of the Nation, that's the one that's, turning peasants into Frenchmen is more like descriptive. The Cult of the Nation in France is more the argument I'm making, which is that there was no sense of French nation before, the 18th century.
Yeah.
So
No.
when we think about these constructs, and of course, Americans are probably the most um, like sensitive to this charge because they had like decades and then boom, they're Americans. But a lot of European countries, they kind of know a lot of this is just a superficial reality imposed uh, post Enlightenment. And
Well, the,
so,
the other thing, and this actually comes from George, so I'll credit George Friedman here, because this is something I think he got right and has been saying for a long time. And I mean, you have to go back and read your, de Tocqueville to really get this. The United States of America is not nationalist. It's actually an anti-nationalist force. It's built on completely different ideas. The French, the Germans, the English, there was something about the blood and the tie to the land that made you French. That was part of the value proposition of it. The United States, remember, is a bunch of immigrants who were saying, no, 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 it's not about your blood. It's not about our connection to this land. We killed the people that were on the land when we got here. What it's about is life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And these rights that are given to you and which government is designed to protect. It's not that the government gives you rights. It's that, no, you give the government power because we have the consent of the governed. That Republican spirit was actually fairly unique. And one of the weird things to me, and it's not just the MAGA camp, you have this on the left too, is this embrace of American nationalism.
yeah, it's
That's
flipped.
that's not the point. The point is actually that the United
European,
States is supposed to be an antidote to nationalism. That
it's
it's
a European.
anybody can come here and can become American. Talk to a Muslim migrant in France who's third generation. You think they feel French? You think the
But this is
French accept them as French?
right. But this is what's totally ironic. Like, I think 9/11 really killed that innocence of America, and America imported European style nationalism afterwards. Precisely at the time when like European nationalism, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of a revival, but like as we've argued before, even the most nationalist parties in Europe, other than Alternative for Deutschland, are all kind of aligning behind European integration. Anyways,
Yeah,
sorry to hijack this in a completely bizarre direction,
I
but
think it's bizarre.
the protests in Serbia were very interesting. They align with a lot of Gen Z stuff going out there. And then that experience with my friend in the car and our two daughters really made me start thinking like the Gen Z is operating under different, I think, operating system. They've downloaded it from the internet themselves because we don't have complete monopoly over their brains. And this is what I want to kind of land the plane on. Right up until all these monitors started showing, these screens starting showing up in your homes, you had the ability to brainwash your kids much more easily. So did the church, the school, and yourself. And you could kind of control what the priest said, or you could choose what priest you wanted to go to if you were religious. You could control what the school said for the most part.
Mhm.
And then you could control what you told them. But our children are increasingly, unless you ban screens, and it's very difficult to do that. Like it's just difficult. Like, like schools require your kids. You'll see this when they become teenagers, your kids. Like
Oh, I know.
schools.
I looked at the high school regulations on that, recently because we are gonna ban screens in the house, but it is a white knuckle fight. Like, it's
But
hard
then
even now, and they're 3, you know?
yeah, but then the school comes in and says, well, no, you need this app, you need that app, you need to log into this. Like you can't do
Mhm.
homework unless you have a screen. And so like the point I'm getting at is that we have, for the first time in human history, introduced, like broken the monopoly over our children's brains, in substantive ways. And I
Mm.
think that you will increasingly see difficulty in mobilizing humans for collective action. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I think you actually I think we inverted this conversation. I think it was actually perfect because I mean, you talked about Serbia. I think this is also a really good way of judging what's happening in Turkey or the former Ottoman Empire right now. To summarize it very succinctly, so last week, a regional court annulled a congress for the CHP. This is the main Turkish opposition party. It's the party of Ataturk. It's the party that really founded like the modern Turkish Republic after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Secular, cosmopolitan, Istanbul. Erdoğan represents Ankara, the interior, the Anatolian heartland, not like, religious, conservative, small c sort of thing. Anyway, so the court came in and said that the CHP's Congress was no good. They removed its party chairman and they reinstalled the former chairman, who's basically hasn't won an election against Erdogan in like 10 years. So it's very clear that Erdogan and his party are saying, yeah, we want to run against this guy because this other guy, we don't like him. Like, we're not doing good against him in the polls. We don't want to throw him in jail because we don't want to make a martyr. So let's have the courts come in and say that the opposition party can't pick its own leader. And to its, I can't pronounce his name, the party chairman. I know the guy that they tried to replace him with, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, but I haven't done the research on how to pronounce the regular chairman. Anyway, he's fighting it. He had this big march to parliament and things like that. Turkish police were dispatched and occupied the CHP headquarters for a little bit. Turkish stocks fell over 6% and triggered some circuit breakers and things like that. And all of the media coverage about this is about Erdogan as a dictator and the demise of Turkish democracy. And this is Erdogan is getting rid of the last vestiges of Turkish democracy. It's that Orban story again. We don't have Viktor Orban anymore, so we're going to write the same stories about Erdogan. And the reason I say that what you said is a perfect segue into it is because the real litmus test here is, does Gen Z get out into the street because they're mad at Erdogan? Or does this just become yet another chapter of the Turkish opposition raising its voice and screaming and wailing and gnashing its teeth? But then, like, nothing actually happens. And there is an election. Yes, like some of it's going to be manipulated with, but there's an election. Turkey is still a democracy. Like, the fact that Erdogan has to go in there with the bullets and occupy the CHP headquarters and do this tells you that the democracy is still functioning. He has something he has to push back against. So it'll be really interesting to see if in Turkey, Gen Z rises to your point and says, we want things that are better, or if this is really not a manufactured story because there's something real here, or if this is something more just about Turkish internal politics and the West is going to blow this out of proportion because it thinks it can write an ideological story about authoritarianism rather than sort of mapping what's going on in Turkey too. So I actually think what you brought up is incredibly helpful because it helps us benchmark just how important some of these breakouts of protests are.
Look, Gen Z and millennials, like, it's just math. Like young millennials too, not like old farts like us. I mean, like young millennials and Gen Z are becoming a bigger demographic, and I tend to, as you do too. We tend to like sneer at demographics, but this is now relevant. This is now, I think, a relevant issue. And what Gen Z stands for is nebulous. What I know what they don't stand for is baby boomers and Gen X. Like, they have disdain for them. They have disdain for millennials too, because we're seen as just a generation that didn't do anything to stand up to the other generations. So they're just going to ignore us. And when I listen to their narratives, it's interesting because they haven't really found where they want to land the plane in terms of ideology. I think they're going to land it pretty far left. And by the way, I love the fact that AOC fans listen to us. Welcome. You're all welcome. I didn't know we triggered some of them. I can't wait to see this criticism in our mailbag episode, which we should do maybe soon.
Yeah, we
Um,
will.
but we weren't critical. I mean, like, yes, okay, fine. We were critical. We were saying that that's not going to work in 2028, her position. But I'm increasingly thinking that by 2032, yeah, I mean, I think that the more left-leaning ideological position probably will find some success, particularly some of the forecasts about AI come true and you start seeing some unemployment, or if the young people at least continue to struggle to find jobs, entry-level jobs, which may be replaced by AI. Like it's setting up a stage for a pretty like nasty fight in politics.
Yeah, I mean, the commentary is interesting. We got accused of simping for billionaires,
Oh
which I think
wow.
was a Gen Z term. My LeBron James example was apparently the worst example you could have possibly given. Just a whole, yeah. We'll put together a whole. Oh, we need to steelman AOC a little bit better. Like we'll get to it. We'll do a whole
Oh,
episode on it. But I will tell you, the fact that she's pushing buttons, that tells you that she's doing something. We only have a little bit of time left. Anything you want to say about basketball? I'm pretty sure I tweeted this after game one. It's Victor Wembanyama's world, and we're all just living in it. By the way, the most important thing geopolitically that's happening is that we now have incontrovertible proof that aliens are here. Like, if you're telling me that that guy is not an alien, like, I'm sorry, call the Men in Black. Like, he is not from this planet. While we're all worried about AI and robotics, maybe we should be worried about EI, extraterrestrial intelligence. But what have you got? I know you wanted to say something about the Thunder before we get out here.
I did want to say one thing. Everybody out there is really angry at the Thunder because they play defense well, they don't play defense. I'm sorry. They massacred the other team like repeatedly. And what I find it interesting, look, I'm a Laker fan, so I obviously did watch the games between Lakers and the Thunder, even though I knew it was going to be very, very bad. But the Lakers in the last two games kind of solved something, even though they got their asses kicked. And what they solved is that the refs will let you do whatever the fuck you want to the Thunder. That's what they solved. Marcus Smart held SGA to 20 points per game. 20 points per game. And you know how he held him to 20 points per game? He held him. Like, I was there. I was there in crypto.com arena and I watched
You were,
it.
yeah, you went
Yeah,
to the game.
for two games.
That's nice.
And he literally held him. It was amazing. One of the great things about being in person at a basketball game is you can watch off the ball action. It's just easier to kind of like ignore the ball. I watched Marcus Smart for like, first of all, I love Marcus Smart. I have his jersey. I play basketball in his freaking jersey. And what he did is he was like, look, fuck this. I'm just going to hold SGA. And he did. And SGA was like, what? How is this legal? And I was just like, yeah, it is legal. You made it legal. Why am I bringing this up? How is this geopolitical at all? I think it's important that we understand to differentiate between like, what is it material constraint and what is not a material. It's an ephemeral one. It's a man-made one. So like, the nuclear program in Iran is not a material constraint to peace. The two sides can just pretend they solve it. President Trump's like polling gasoline prices, China's food prices, those things are material constraints. Similarly, the way that like Wembanyama being 7'6" is a material reality. He's not 6'6". You can't pretend that he's 6'6". He is 7'6". Refs giving OKC an advantage is not an atomic reality. It's like a human construct. And what the Lakers did, like Lakers basically died so everybody else could live and defeat Oklahoma City Thunder. And like, I just don't understand why other teams like the problem with the Spurs is, classy franchise. They're all good young kids. Like there's just so many like adjectives for the Spurs. They just need to do the same thing. They need to just grab SGA and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to hold you for the whole game. Have fun. That's kind of what I thought was interesting. And watching that made me think like, sometimes when we analyze the world, we overemphasize what cannot be changed. And the truth is, JJ Redick was like, no, there's no way the fucking NBA wants a team out of Oklahoma City to be a dynasty. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no, there's no reason for that. So the refs are just giving them a certain latitude, but they have to give it to the other team. And JJ Redick, God bless him, great coach, he was like, Marcus, fucking go and hold SGA for 42 minutes a game. And he had like a terrible series. Now, of course, the Lakers still lost because they didn't have the talent to compete with them, but they shut SGA down. SGA played like a backup point guard in that series.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Well,
Mark Smart did.
the last game, game 4, SGA only scored 19. So I think the Spurs are starting to catch on to what you're saying a little bit. I mean, I pride myself on my basketball takes being as bad and as hyperbolic as my geopolitical takes are not. So you heard it here first. I think Spurs win I think they're going to sweep the Knicks, and I think they'll beat the Thunder. Like, I think that's true. And as long as he stays healthy, and knock on wood, I hope he does because he's amazing. This is Victor's league. Like, he is. I don't know how you deal with that guy if he's going to play like he did in game 1. I mean, he like combines Jordan's nastiness with a Steph Curry 3 with like Sean Bradley height, but he can move, and he's got like some like it's just like it's incredible
And
to
intelligent.
watch.
He's intelligent.
He's
Incredible.
he's the whole thing.
And 22 years old, like just it's the personality, just like everything about him, like is just so incredible, and it's really incredible that somebody that tall is that interested in his craft as well. I mean, remember, that is one of the biggest problem with very tall people. They are forced to play the basketball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And often that leads to just resentment, such as, I don't know, maybe the starting center for the Los Angeles Lakers, DeAndre Ayton, who clearly hates being on the court. Anyways,
and Victor's the Gen Z superstar. Like, maybe that's a result of watching all those things and putting them all together.
He's a great example of Gen Z, maybe the only one. It's interesting you said that. If you're not a basketball fan and you're listening to us, go and learn a little bit about Victor Wembanyama, because he actually double clicks on a lot of things we're talking about. He learned English because he knew he would play in the NBA, and he like put a lot of effort into doing that. Again, I'm not sure that a 7'6" guy from France in the 1970s or 80s would have been as connected with what it is that takes him to succeed, because he wouldn't have had that information at his fingertips.
Yeah, his name was Arvydas Sabonis.
Boom.
He didn't have the same connection by the time we got to him, and by the time he was like the only guy in the league who could like give Shaq any problems, and by that point he had no cartilage left in his knees, and he was like 34. But
yeah,
okay,
that's a great comp. Yep.
Yeah. All right, we'll leave it there, listeners.